This is exciting. We're starting our new semester. We're excited to have all the guys and gals back. There's been great things going on beyond the school. We've had an internship at Nickelodeon, another one starting at Cartoon Network. We've been working on everything from Game of Thrones to, well, I can't tell you.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I can't tell you. We've been working on some great stuff. We've got two guys that are successfully hanging out at Marvel and getting paid really good money to do so. So that's exciting. And for those of you that don't know, we've opened a new wing for animation and for another classroom and for Benjamin to have a place to go hide away and be able to talk to people. There have been some other changes. You guys heard that Yudi is stepping down. Basically, Yudi is a powerhouse. She is taking me about 3 people to replace what she was doing. But basically, this was her dream, is to get this thing off the ground and get it to where it's at now. I'm honored that she has the confidence in me and in the staff that we're going to carry on without her. So, but the truth is she's not gone. She's still here 2 days a week and is going to be helping us with new projects that we start up. For example, one of the things that we're looking to do as we move on is an alternative program, a program for those folks that might not be able to get into the full-time program, and maybe what's for them is to focus on a certain kind of project like animation or this, that, and the other that is right for them. So there's all kinds of things that we're starting. We're looking at ways that we can expand across the United States or help other schools across the United States do it, and we're exploring ways of doing that responsibly. Because our first goal is this program, and our first goal is to do everything that we can to help the guys here go out and be successful. So, with that, and with me moving into the executive director role, we have Benjamin, who's been amazing as a behaviorist to come into the program and help us to really start to systemize the program, really start to create ways that we can evaluate how well someone's doing, what they might need to move forward. But now he's, thank God, welcome, accepted the position of principal. It's incredibly exciting for me because my new position is, as I'm moving forward, is going to require me doing more fundraising and partnering with studios and partnering with other schools and organizations, and I don't have time for the school. And you know what? I needed to find someone who was way better at this than me, and that's how you make something successful. And I'm lucky enough to have found someone who's just absolutely amazing in pulling this off. So, without further ado, Mr. Benjamin Mack.
All right, Benjamin Mack. Thank you guys all for coming, especially people who are in second and third year, because I know this is going to seem like a lot of redundancy initially, but the primary focus of my coming in this principal position is exactly like Ernie talked about, which is establishing sort of systematic reforms. We've done a really good job up to this point individualizing and tailoring the education to each individual. However, it's made it difficult for us as they get further and further on in the program to sort of, ensure that we don't have any particular gaps in their repertoires. Oh, we want this person to really focus on editing, and then some job comes up that's editing related, but then we have to do a bunch of additional training prior to them getting hired. So the reason we're going to go over this is because primarily all of these changes and these reforms that we're going to make are all positive. It's all as a result of our teachers putting in an entire summer, not just our 2 weeks of prep, but I had them focused on this since last spring. We got to be thinking about developing curriculum. We got to be thinking about developing curriculum. And the difference between curriculum and course content is that we're looking to create a systematic, empirically evaluated approach to teaching these skills. As a board-certified behavior analyst and a doctoral candidate in looking at instructional design measures, that's my primary interest in being here. So that, like Ernie's saying, that we can start changing the game entirely so that we can guarantee that when someone completes all components of our curriculum, that they can absolutely 100% do these things, and not just do them accurately, but do them at a specific rate. That's going to take time. It's not all going to happen. And in fact, we've been working towards this even prior to my coming here, and we're finally at a point where we can begin implementing all this stuff. So in sum, this is me, geeking out as an academic, like unwrapping the bow on this super sweet systematic curriculum. We're also changing a lot of the requirements because we're recognizing that some of our graduates have certain areas, like I said, gaps or small deficiencies. Again, usually not in accuracy, but in fluency and speed. And so that has caused some problems when they get down into the studio and there's a larger lead up time. And we're trying to eliminate that. We want them to go straight from the end of our program, either into our studio or outside placement seamlessly. So we're working really hard to do this. And so every single year is going to get the benefit of this enhanced curriculum, this more integrated process. And the people who are going to get the most benefit out of it are the people who get to go through it start to finish. So all the first year parents, you guys are really lucky. I said at graduation that this last year was the most well-trained, technically and behaviorally prepared class that we've ever graduated. And I look forward to saying that every year. So I will try and make this as quick as possible because I know that it's going to get hot in here as the day goes on because we can't have that general AC on. But if you guys need me to repeat anything or raise a hand and I will call on you, we're going to try and save questions to the end. We're also Skyping in a bunch of people from across the country, so we are going to be doing some technical stuff, so hopefully that doesn't really cause too many issues. So if they all have sound, I'm going to go ahead and...
Yeah, I got the thumbs up from all of them.
Okay, so we're all good. So I'm going to share my screen, share it, and let's just play this guy. Okay, and you guys are going to get to watch me play my keyboard air guitar because this is the quickest way to set this up. And we'll kill the lights. We don't want anybody to fall asleep, but it'll keep it cool in here too. Alright, so essentially welcome. The purpose of this is essentially to create clarity on the new features and programs that we're changing here at EM. So for first year parents, this is just all me you anyway, so it's not going to really be that much of a change for anything. So then we also want to make sure that you guys are aware of classroom expectations, graduation requirements. Now this is new this year. We're just putting this in place. So this is only going to apply to the first year students as they go through. We're not going to retroactively apply any of this to second year, third year students because that's not fair. But they're going to benefit from a higher bar. Available support during the program and after graduation. This is something that's come up a lot when I was talking with graduates of last year that they were really unaware of the additional supports that we have or about what the transition process is like from graduation into the studio. So I want to create a lot more transparency and clarity there. Expectations and processes for what an Exceptional Mind Studio, when you hear me refer to EMS, that's what I'm talking about as the studio downstairs, as well as just open the conversation now. If there hasn't been a sufficient conversation in place previously, well then let's start one now. As well as hopefully the more you know, the more you're going to be invested in participatory in what we're doing with our program. And so Kristen will talk about that at the end of our talk. Student CM staff, institutional and personal goals, as well as, and the ultimate goal of all of this is to improve outcomes for students. We get them a certain number of hours here, and if they're living with you at home, then that's that much more repetition that we can have occurring at home in terms of supporting and changing their behavior. Okay, so in case you were unaware, this is just straight off of our website. The mission, or the vision rather, for Exceptional Minds is committed to creating a world in which individuals on the autism spectrum are recognized for their talents and abilities and can achieve their full potential. The thing that drew me here, and I think this is one of Ernie's primary motivations for being here as well, is the presumption of competence. I read all of the well, I shouldn't say all the research. I have read a lot of the research. I've read the people who researched the research. We call that meta-analysis. And when you look at, there were almost 25,000 studies conducted to date on vocational training for adults post-graduation of high school on the autism spectrum, and you're looking at 90+% of them not finding any kind of gainful employment. And the 9% who do, less than 1/2% of them are working in an independent and competitive employment setting. The vast majority of it is in supported employment. And so what we're doing is very novel, it's very pioneering. We're narrowing down the focus and the goal of how we're getting there. And so that's what this is all about. Obviously the mission here is to provide young adults on the autism spectrum with customized instruction and hands-on experience to earn a living in the fields of multimedia, computer animation, and post-production. The way that we see this, and this actually was sort of a light bulb yesterday, when we were on the phone with a parent who had their student here over the summer, who is he works for hotel companies doing organizational consulting there. For those people who are able to get through the technical stuff, we're going to be able to offer meaningful employment. I mean, this is not easy stuff. And for those people who get through it and for whatever reason, their interest changes, and we've had this happen a bunch, we're going to offer 3 years where hopefully it's going to be a really insightful and self-concept changing experience so that they themselves start to presume confidence for themselves. Obviously, we can't guarantee employment for anybody, but we're doing a pretty good job so far. But from that standpoint, I just want to say that, it's okay too if at the end of 3 years somebody is saying, I'm not into this. It's like college. I mean, raise your hands if you're doing the thing that you went to undergrad for. I'm not. And I had to go for an extra, the counter's still ticking there on me finishing school, but right now it's at 7 years of school to be able to pursue what it is that I want to do. So this is something that we came up with this year, and so just to kind of lay out the lands in terms of systems. So we have our mission, we have institutional objectives, we have curriculum objectives, learning objectives, we have composite skills and component skills, and it's this giant tree. There are a few institutional objectives, there's one vision, one mission, there's a handful of these, and it just grows out more and more. We're trying to create that entire map. Because if we can go through skill by skill, and we can say this skill is important, this skill is not important. And we'll know after multiple iterations of piloting our curriculum. So these are what I'm calling the C-TACOs. That's the acronym for all of them. So self-awareness, we want them to show self-awareness and recognition of their own strengths and limitations, because that's how they're going to be able to get realistic jobs. I can't tell you how many times when we're doing assessment, somebody comes in and says, I'm going to be head of Pixar. I don't care how talented you are, you're not, right? That's a political thing. Like the guys who are head of Pixar are not the most talented people. That's not what gets you there. You come from money, you were born into the system, and I want to be king of England. Not going to happen. Not to say that we can't get somebody as close as possible if they have that talent, give them some awesome job. Independence, obviously I'm sure this is something that you're all striving for. I know I work with families in their homes, and this is something that they talk about as a major incentive for them. They want to work really hard so they can get their lives back. And the goal, like I said here, is independent and competitive employment. Technical fluency, that sort of goes without much further explanation. And then this is a big one that we're realizing more and more, is ambassadorship is a big key. The reason that people like Marvel, or HBO, or Stargate, or New Edit, or Mango, or Mr. Wolf are opening their doors is because they want to have experience and participate in working with somebody who has autism. That's the reason we get in. Our guys stay there because they're talented and they're good enough, and we've trained them well, and they're dedicated. But we need individuals to embrace that. It's tough when we have somebody who doesn't want to be associated with autism, who doesn't want to show up at an event with an EM t-shirt on because they don't want that label. And we're recognizing, man, if that's what gets the door open, you gotta wear that shirt. You're gonna have to do that. So, and we don't need them to be the face of autism by any means. We're not asking them to go around and do talks or anything like that. We're just saying that that's something that when they advocate for themselves and for the program, we need them to sort of own that diagnosis. And as somebody, this is coming from somebody who doesn't believe the diagnosis, by the way. As a behavior analyst, that's not my field, but. Career building, and this is another thing that we're really recognizing that they need to start earlier in the program, is starting to work on their overall assets so that over 3 years, when they're done with school, we're not putting those together prior to their getting a job elsewhere, which has sort of been the way that we've done it. We've been really focused on the content and making sure they have the skills, and now we're recognizing, now that we kind of have that part of it down, let's start in a way earlier march to get them the hard assets that they need, from resumes to reels to internship opportunities we can do. And then occupational awareness. Acquire sufficient understanding of the scope of the field. A lot of our guys come in this because they love this and they have no idea what kind of jobs are out there. I'd say maybe, a handful in each class, 2 or 3, are really like, I've actually been out looking, and the thing that I want to do is I want to work in previs. And the rest of the class is like, that sounds cool, what is previs? And even though we're bringing in lots of people to talk about these things, we're recognizing we need to educate them a lot more about what jobs are available, because while we may get them their first job, it's probably not their last. Hopefully it is, that'd be awesome, if it's a great job. And then the last one is service. And this is more an institutional objective for us that is, it less applies to the full-time students and more applies to, like Ernie was discussing, the alternative students, students who might not necessarily get into our program. Individuals that we can find a way to service them and help them foster and pursue their interests. So this is our summer program, this is our private workshops. This is the alternative program that we want to build. Obviously we're servicing the students who are here, but it's more about us being able to help those who might not qualify, who don't quite have those skills. So, a last thing to say about this is there's going to be a lot of information. I'm going to try and go through it efficiently. If there's something that you really got to stop me on, please do. Also, from the standpoint of taking notes or photos or whatever, we're going to send out a little digital ebook, a little compressed PDF file that has a lot of this stuff on here, so that you guys have it home and you can look at it and look over it more in depth.
Can we share that with other agencies?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, sounds fine to me. I mean, it'll have our logo on it, so as long as they can't wipe that off. Even though we know they can, and our students all could. So these are just basic EM rules and expectations. So for seconds and thirds years, this is nothing new. Just so you know, earliest student arrival is 9:30 a.m. We get some students who are showing up here at 8:15 because of access or other travels or whatever. We need them not to wait in the halls or down in the lobby, but hang out on a bench outside unless it's raining. California's beautiful, it's gorgeous, let's hang outside. But we've gotten some complaints in the office about people sitting in the halls listening to videos without headphones on and things like that. And so we want to make sure that we keep everybody, on our good side here, especially because at some day we want to kick them out as we expand. Lunch is from 12:30 to 1:30. So we need people to come back at 1:30, and that's a really big key thing, is that you make sure they're back. Every day on Thursday is professional dress day. That's when we schedule all of our professional tours. They might get interviewed. We just had CNN here not too long ago. When Jim Lehrer and NBC News came through, all of our guys knew to dress up because that was in advance. But who knows who's walking in through the doors on Thursdays? It might be their next employer. So we want to make sure that they're dressed appropriately. And I'm going to cover what that means. But business professionals, or business casual, sorry. So EM's not responsible for personal favors to students or parents, just so you know we're not on the hook for that. Parents are responsible for calling when they're going to be late and or going to be absent for the day. As we're working towards independence, and for those of you who attended last year to the sort of parent boot camp that Emily and I ran, Emily's the behaviorist here, we want you to be hands-off. We'll let you know when we want you to be hands-on. But for the most part, we want them to be responsible for everything. We have tons of internal monitoring systems to handle whatever problems may arise. So we want to make sure that they're responsible for it. Because if you guys are swooping in and helping them out, and even though it seems like help, they're going to become really dependent on it, and quickly. Everybody does. I can just now text my wife every time I forgot the grocery list. So, students, not parents, should communicate with their instructor in the program associated when they need time off from school. Please don't call in and say this. They need to come and talk to us about it. And if they mess it up, let them mess up. Errors are super important in learning. We're obviously not a punishment-oriented place. So we'll be understanding, but we'll be firm, and we'll make sure it doesn't happen again. Or we'll do our best.
And also make sure that the students contact me directly. I'm Ronald, the program associate, when they're going to be running late or absent, because sometimes the instructors are not here. So please have them email me once they've already, and copy me in the email to the instructor that they're going to be running late or going to be absent.
Yeah, and we're going to go over all of this with them at the parent orientation. And even though it will be a review for the second and third year students, this new stuff will hopefully not cause them too much anxiety. So, let them, like we kind of said already, a couple of different ways, advocate for themselves. We need them to be respectful to us, and that's also a big part of our time. Sometimes we get people who are like lingering or hanging on, or we can't get them out the door. As much as we love your kids, we need to do our job as well. Usually we don't get a lot of disrespectful behavior, but that's usually the biggest thing. Students are ambassadors of EM and therefore must always behave in a professional manner when industry professionals are on campus or on field trips. So if you guys get any info from them, and this is where you can help us out, about, hey, we're going to Disney today, or we're going to Pixar, or we're going to go tour Marvel, and they're showing up in a day-old t-shirt and flip-flops, you might step in and say, hey, is that really what you think you should wear to a potential employer? because a lot of these people are potential employers. So, okay, so hygiene dress code. And this is a rule that we did implement last year, but I just want to be clear with the new incoming parents. We're going to be really clear about that. We're going to have deodorant here, we're going to tell them to wipe their face. That's not going to be the very first time they show up and that happens. We're not going to send them home, but then we're going to say, hey, this is the precedent-setting thing, next time that happens. So if your kids take access or whatever, we're going to do whatever we can to do it, but we don't want them participating, because otherwise they're not going to learn. And that's not like a punishment thing if they're going to be in one of our adjunct facilities working on some independent project or something like that with some supervision. That's what we'll do. But we just want to be really, really clear that, because this has been a big problem for us, is that individuals are going to interviews and jobs and things like that, and they're showing up and we're having to send them back and be like, are you kidding me? Like, what are you wearing? You're gonna interview a marble. Like, what? And so we need to set that standard here now. So it's important for them to look and smell their best, because, and this is something that happens a lot too. It's at random. Sometimes somebody will stop by. Like, we had Ben Affleck come in and his whole movie crew, and we knew they were coming one day. They popped by 2 more times to talk to us, you know, and they're bringing on a lot of producers and a lot of other people that are important individuals that we want to have a positive experience. And we don't want people to come in here and say, oh, this is exactly what I thought people with autism were like. You know, we're trying to change the conversation. We're trying to say, hey, they're just as capable as anybody else. This is not, in fact, a disability. They just think differently and they learn differently. And we're going to teach them something else, you know, to demonstrate that. So obviously we're hitting on this pretty hard. Always wear clean clothes. And this is something, just, you know, shorts are fine. We just don't want gym shorts. So we also don't want flip-flop sandals. Now, if you are a lady, you can get away with flip-flops. If they're whatever, flip heels, I don't even know what you call them. So, but our staff gets away with them all the time. That's a bonus. And then no ripped jeans. We don't want ripped tees. We don't want ripped anything. This is all in our student handbook, and it was as of last year, at the beginning of last year. But we're just going to let you know, like, we're really going to enforce this strongly. And for the most part, this is not an issue. But it's only an issue because we've kind of put our foot down on it. Okay, so the course sequence, in case you were unaware. The course sequence is that in the first year, Photoshop and Flash are taught simultaneously. Last year, there was a stopgap measure, and we had all 3 years in the work readiness curriculum because it was a brand new curriculum that I designed, and we decided that it was important because as we're changing it, they all did it after the first semester. The third years who ended up graduating, they went on to focus on career realities for the second half of the year, and I continued on with the first and second year, but that was as a stopgap measure to move it simply into the first year. We're doing the same thing this year with career realities. Kristen, who is our curriculum designer and the instructor for that course, is going to be teaching it both to the third years and to the second years because we're recognizing that needs to happen earlier. So they're going to all get the same information, but we're going to teach it across 2 classes, so it'll be in the morning of the second year and in the afternoon on Mondays. So that's the other major change that we've made. Sorry, I'll go through second year really quick. So Premiere and After Effects are in the fall, and then they go into a production. Usually that's some paid job that we bring in, if I'm getting this correctly, yeah. It's a paid job where they're getting actual credit and they're working to produce something really awesome. Sometimes that will involve the first year or third year, depending on the size of the job and the deadline that we need to meet. And then they move into VFX. Again, career realities will be taught throughout the whole year. And then in the third year, they're going to get MIA, which is a 3D modeling and compositing program. They do advanced VFX, and then they move into portfolio building, where they're really focusing on, hey, this is like all the things that I need to be designing right now so that my resume and my reel look incredible. And then studio prep and testing, which I'll go into later. And I'll talk about more about what work readiness and career realities are. So not a huge change, but just so you're aware. The other major change that we are making is in the past on Fridays. Work readiness has been in the morning and career realities was just in the afternoon. We're making Mondays an entire day dedicated to vocational training. So it's going to stagger where they're going to get direct instruction in one half of the day, and then it's going to be applied practice in the second half of the day. And the nickname we're using for that is vocational professional training or vocational projects. So we're just calling it VoCPro for short. But that's going to vary based on what they do. They might be working on their reel, but we're going to be working on fluency-based measures or self-management issues. So we'd be designing a lot more like a implementation of the skills that we're doing within the classroom setting. So, okay. Oh, did I lose my?
You just click the on the side, there's a button. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, turn it on. Oh,
Maybe you need to walk up to the computer.
no, the light keeps going off. It's,
No, the side button, press it when you're at.
okay. Whoa.
Okay. Here, let me put new batteries in it, Benjamin.
Yeah. So I will just try and talk from here if I can. And do this. Okay. So the other thing that the second and third years may be familiar with is the ICP process, and that's the individual career plan. This was something that happened in the middle of the second year, and then we did a third year review in the third year. We're now integrating that across all 3 years because we have a lot stronger, more consistent measures that are going to happen quarterly. So this is a new and improved, revised system so that it's a lot more sensitive to the needs of the students, so that when issues arise, we're able to address them immediately, rather than waiting a semester or 2 before we're really able to put something in place. So I'll just use this little mouse until we get that. So it's going to consist of 4 quarterly assessments, and this is something, by the way, I get made fun of a lot for, but whenever we're doing assessments, I like to create nicknames for the assessments, because otherwise it's the blah, 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 blah assessment. And everyone's like, wait, which one is that? So every assessment is going to have a nickname, so if you hear some weird word out of your son or daughter's mouth, it's probably something I designed as an assessment. So we have the Studio Readiness Scale, or what we're calling the SRS. We have the Professional Improvement Plan, or the PIP. We have the Work Readiness Inventory, which is the RI. And then we have the Student Progress Evaluation, or Skills Assessment, which is going to be called the Skills. So, and then once annually, there's going to be an ICP meeting with parents for every student across all 3 years. Is it working? All right, let's see.
Side button first.
Yeah, the light's just not staying on.
Benjamin, the side button first, did you?
Yeah, I'm hitting it.
Underneath the computer.
Oh, underneath, I don't know where that side button is. Yeah, Kat will take care of it, and I will keep going. So that did not happen last year. So for first years last year, they did not have an ICP. So, but we were, I will say, you know, as sort of a consolation prize, we did have the new work readiness program, so they did benefit from both the RI and the PIP, which, as Kat can attest to, was pretty monumental. It was really influential. So they got that benefit, which was really awesome. Same thing with the second years, and they went through their process. I think we need to reconnect the whole thing. So.
Benjamin, can you explain a little bit, do you explain the
Yeah, I do explain
SRS and the
it.
PIP?
Yep, I go through each assessment, and yes.
Will the information be given quarterly regarding ICP?
Yes, the information, so and I'm going to go through that as well later in the program, but we have, so the RI and the PIP are for internal assessments, because it's, as I'll discuss, the reasons why that is, and then the SRS and the skills scores that are going to come out, those will be sent home to you. So you will see all of those quarterly, and the RI and the PIP is how we're going to monitor things internally to make sure that we're on track. So. Yeah, so the first year ICP is what we're going to call a fit test. I'll go into that specifically. Second year ICP is, and these two are the same thing that they've always been, which is career planning specifically. Like, hey, let's talk about what you want to do, what kind of, now that you have enough experience in our program, you have 3 semesters and a couple summers under your belt, what can you be doing to better prepare for what your interests are, and how can we work towards, in the third year, specialization. So. Okay, so in terms of the ICP assessments, so the first one, these are the internal assessments. So we'll start with the RI. It's a guided self-assessment tool, and it's used to help students evaluate their professional skills across the 5 pillars of work readiness, which are, well, I go into that later actually. Identify areas that need improvement to ensure that they have the necessary awareness to work on improving those areas. And so from that, essentially, it is a 25-point summary, where they have to identify and evaluate themselves quarterly, where they are at on a 1 to 5 scale. And then they also identify the rationale for why they think they're there, as well as what they could do to improve it. It takes a while.
Yeah.
And we hold them accountable to it. So when we have students who don't talk very much or who aren't really good with hygiene, and they put like, oh, I'm awesome, I'm super consistent. We're like, no, let's rewind. So that's what I mean by guiding. We sit down with them personally and we walk them through each component of it. And then once it's approved, then they move on to the PIN. And these are areas requiring the most improvement. We ask them to select the 3 areas of most urgency in order of urgency, because we're going to address them one at a time. These plans consist of goal setting, measurement, and accountability. And when I say that, everyone's like, oh, yay, that sounds nice. This is from like the super scientific standpoint of how we do goal setting and arranging contingencies for self-management, self-programming for monitoring and reinforcement, how we set measurable and achievable goals versus just sort of abstract wants. So then in terms of the other ICP assessments, these are the distributed assessments. These are the ones that you will all get. So I'm going to go through them in a little more in-depth than I did those two, because you don't really need to know what those look like or how they work exactly, but those are things we'll talk about. They'll be talking points for all of our ICP meetings. So the studio readiness scale, this has gone through 47 iterations thus far, so it is pretty dialed. We really like this assessment. It is essentially a tool that monitors students' performance and how ready they are to enter EMS or the outside employment setting on their own. And to be clear, it is a measurement over time. So at the beginning of every new semester or every new program, they go back to 1. So that we can look at the rate of progress. And this does a number of things for us. It permits us to evaluate their progress. It allows us to analyze the data such that we can come up with strong learning curves with regression analysis. And then it also permits us to evaluate how good we are at teaching. If we see really low curves, we're like, man, there's something wrong with our curriculum or the delivery model. We have to figure, maybe it's repetition, maybe it's that we don't have the right fluency aims. And so this is going to permit us to improve the program substantially. But please keep in mind that your kid may have been at a certain score last year, and when they move into this year, they're going to start at 1. If they come in with a lot of other skills, they will be at like a 2. So there's 2 categories in the studio readiness scale, which are their technical competence and the level of independence. So when we go into SRS, again, I like to abbreviate stuff, you'll see a TC score and an LI score. These are on a scale that ranges from 1 to 7. I'm going to put these rubrics up in just a minute. So 1 is assigned to nascent skills, like either they can probably figure it out on their own just because all of the students are generally pretty good at interfacing. You know, they're all digital natives. And 4 is the level we're shooting for. That indicates that they are ready for EMS. 5 or above is the level that indicates they're ready for outside placement. So we follow them all the way through the studio. So it starts in year 1 and continues through their time at EMS. So all of our EMS artists, no matter how long they've been down there, are now being assessed on their SRS. And we have a lot more confidence in the scale now to the point where we're tying pay raises to it down there. So because at that point, the skills aren't changing the way they do from year to year. They're doing the same thing over and over and over again. So we need to see consistent improvement. So it's something to really familiarize yourself with. So in terms of the independence scale, or their LI score, obviously it goes from complete independence down to total assistance. We need to prompt the heck out of them. So we're shooting for a 4. That with supervision, which is the professional model, right? There's supervisors in every professional studio out there. When you run into stuff and you run into problems and you need to troubleshoot, you ask your supervisor for help. But if you're asking for help to the tune of every 5, every 10 minutes, you're not going to be meeting deadlines. Now, if it's artistic feedback, that's something else. Like, because the supervisors are the ones who know what the client wants, and if they're not delivering that feedback appropriately, then that's one thing. And then we have our technical competence scale. So we've got novice, beginner, apprentice, intermediate is where we're looking at. That's employable. You get up to the 5, then we're talking to professional. We know that we can send you on your own into a different, and I don't mean that we just like boot you out of our program. I'm going to talk about what supports we have that go on once you even move out of EMS, or go directly from our full-time program into an outside employment setting. But that means that we think that you're ready to be employed. And then we hope that our guys get to a 6 and 7 level. We don't need it for them to have career-long employment, but that would be awesome. That would just mean that they would be moving up the ranks in whatever it is that they're doing. We would expect that 6 and 7s would be achieved outside of our thing. But for grant purposes and being an academic, we have to have a scale that represents what's out there. So even though we're only focused on that range of 1 to 4, 1 to 5, we need 6 and 7 so that we have context for where the other skills are at. Okay? So in terms of ICP assessments, continuing to move on. So the other one is the skills completed learning score, or the skills. I had some other good nicknames for it that were vetoed, but this is a good one. So when you hear the skills score, essentially this is what we're going to be using as grading. And a lot of people say, well, why don't you call them grades? And that's what we piloted last year. So for those of you who got grades last year, we piloted it, and we found that it wasn't sensitive enough. It didn't as accurately represent where the student was at, and then it also didn't inform our pursuit of this broad empirical evaluation of what we're teaching. Because it was like, oh, they have an E or an S, and there's a percentage attached to that, great. But that didn't say like where they were at with respect to. The other thing is that was not a dynamic measure, that was a static measure. And what I mean by that is, so, okay, I failed my first test of the year, and my grade's gonna suffer for the rest of the year, even though my skills have gone way beyond that point. So, okay, I bombed the first quarter of whatever we're doing, and now my grade is ruined, but I don't have to be responsible for that performance. We're gonna do the opposite. This is a continuous evaluation. And so what we're gonna do, and I've made it as simple as possible, you will get a percentage score. But I'm just going to tell you kind of how we calculate this so you can kind of understand where we're going with this. Is that we're going to monitor the progress in the classroom. It's similar to grading, and then it's a percentage. And it's assessed by the ratio of skills mastered to those that have been presented. So if there have been 4 skills presented, your skills score is only out of those 4 that are presented. And what's going to be really awesome about this is that then when we sit down in the ICP, we can scale this up or scale it down in an accordion-like fashion. You can say, well, where were they 6 weeks ago? Well, that's where they were here. Where are they now? They're here now. Here's where they are as a percentage of completion over the entire program. They are 17% of the way through. They can say, how did we do last week? Well, here's what was presented. And so we can create a million different ways to analyze this data because it's a dynamic evaluation. But we wanted it to make sense to you guys so that you have a general idea when you get a really quick look at a glance score or a snapshot of how they're doing. It's going to be a percentage. So the example that I have here is really simple. So 10 skills have been presented in the course and 7 have been mastered. So for those of you who are good at math, 7 out of 10 times 100% is 70%. So that's where they would be at. And then we're going to say that some skills are going to carry more weight than others. And I don't know how much I want to get into the science of learning on this, but essentially, if you teach a sufficient amount, by the way, just out of curiosity, who's heard of the Big 6 plus 6? By Carl Binder? No? I'm a dork. So essentially, it's this idea that what Carl Binder came up with is he said, we can bring down all fine motor skills to 12 skills. So initially he thought he could do it in 6, it turned out he was wrong. After more evaluation, like another decade and a half, they realized that it wasn't quite that way. But if they teach 12 skills, that any individual who has those 12 skills can do any fine motor task ever. And all they have to do is teach those. When they've done this with language learning, they have gotten it down to they teach 38 phonemes. And that is it. And you can read every word in the English language. Yeah, it's nuts. It's like, hey, instead of doing it, so there's all this weird progressive theory about education. When you look at the science of how people have actually done it, they're able to get outcomes at 4 to 9 times the rate of standard education. And if you guys want a tidbit about that, I'll talk about it later, because this is where I geek out and I'm like, what are we doing? They ran a $200 million study in the 60s that the federal government of the United States did. And it all concluded all this stuff like, oh, we should all be doing this, and it's taught in less than 5% of schools across the country. It's a bummer, yeah.
So are the instructors evaluating all of the skills on a weekly basis? Is that how?
Yes, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be breaking up. So in the syllabi, which you may or may not get a copy of, we're definitely going to hand them to students, but like a college, you guys don't need to worry necessarily about what the course content is, we got it covered. You're welcome to look at it if you request it. I'm sure we can send it out. But from that standpoint, in the syllabi, it's going to talk about the curriculum objectives and the learning objectives. Below learning objectives are other composite skills and component skills. And so lesson by lesson, we're gonna map how many of those things are in there. And it's because we wanna look at how much are those skills being repeated, not from a redundancy standpoint, but just from a repetition and fluency standpoint. And are we missing something? So the way that we look at this is we're gonna break it down into this giant tree-like map. This is a massive endeavor. This is a really big, it was overwhelming for our very hardworking instructors who busted their butts for the last, I don't know, 3 weeks or more. I mean, a lot longer than that probably. But to really start putting this together. And then this year, we're hoping by the end of this year, we're gonna have all of those component skills mapped. And then the following year, what we're gonna be able to do is we're gonna be able to say, how many of those do we actually need to teach through? There's this process called derived relations, or for those of you who are math geeks, it's called the transitive property. But if you teach A to B and B to C, you should get A to C for free. Right? You should also get B to A for free and C to B for free. That's not necessarily true with the autism population. A lot of the stuff needs to be directly trained. So we're going to try and measure how lean can we make that instruction and still guarantee the outcome that we're looking for. And that's going to be a multi-year process. That's going to take us 4 or 5 years. Yeah?
When you say skills, are these that are skills that are used across all the different programs and curriculums?
Exactly.
Because
So Nancy brings up a good point in case you couldn't hear her. She's saying, are these skills that are used across all programs? That's the idea. One of the things that has haunted us for the past couple years in the 3rd year is we've been trying to keep pace with the studio when they change directions on what software they're using. It's been problematic because we shift and then they're like, oh, you know, we taught a bunch of Mocha, and they're like, we're not using Mocha anymore. Don't waste your time on that. And then we get them down there and they're like, why didn't you spend enough time on Mocha? And we're like, oh man, we can't do this. Because the software is going to change and they're going to have to learn new software as it comes up. And we need to identify what are the core skills that they need to have. That the program doesn't matter, it's going to be arbitrary. Whether they're doing it in Nuke or After Effects or Mocha or Silhouette or Animate or whatever, Toon Boom, I don't care what the program is, they'll pick it up faster and they'll be able to generalize those skills across other things. And that's what's going to get us down to this whatever 38 or 6+6
So
level.
Flash or, I mean Flash.
Yep. Yeah, so like one of the things that we want to make sure too is like computer fluency. Like how quick are you with the mouse? You know, and this also enables us to identify other skills. Like, okay, maybe some of our individuals are not great readers. Well, that makes navigating the menu of any interface really hard. And then what we need to do is give them a process by which they can train themselves to be fluent in a menu so they're not reading. I'm not reading state as, I'm just like looking for the S in the file menu. Like, you know, you're just trying to move as quickly as possible. And our goal is to get it down to that really core skill set. And then that's when we've got something that's like golden and universal across all computer education worldwide. And we're working towards that because it's going to produce a better outcome for what we're aiming to do, but it's also going to permit us, with a lot of the people who have been interested, like in London, or we've got an offer, I think, from Bogota and someplace in the Middle East. I mean, she's just getting emails and phone calls all the time saying, come to us in Georgia or Florida or New York and teach us how to do this. Well, we can teach them what we do, but it's super specific, and there's kind of only one Hollywood. You know, we can teach kids in Florida to do this, but the jobs are still coming from here, so why teach kids in Florida to do this? Why not just get the talent out of Florida to come here? Which has been kind of how we've focused on it, or Tennessee. So what we're going to talk about is that the more sophisticated and complex the skill is in the hierarchy, meaning the more component skills it involves, the more we're going to weight it. So component skills are worth 1 point each, and that's a lesson by lesson thing. Learning objectives, which are composite skills, they're made up of a bunch of those things, are worth 2 points each, and curriculum objectives, or what I'm calling super composite skills, are worth 3 points each. Now, it's interesting because what should happen is if we get all the component skills correctly, both the learning objectives and the curriculum objectives should just emerge on their own. That should just happen. But that doesn't necessarily happen. And I've been working really hard with the instructors, and so have Kat and Kristen, to explain why that occurs. And this is what I did my master's thesis on, so I geek out on this stuff a lot, is that when people don't get to a certain level of fluency, and by fluency I mean accuracy plus speed, they cannot see the link between higher thinking or higher order skills. And the easiest example I think is algebra. You may have somebody who gets 100% on every addition, subtraction, multiplication test, or division test, and they can do fractions, but they can't do them in fractions of a second in their head. And then you put them on algebra, and they can't do math. And it's because they're so stuck in computation that they can't step back and see that there's some other manipulation that's going on that's more important. And the same thing happens here. It happens in all kinds of learning. And so we want to dial it up to that level where if we don't see those learning objectives, those composite and super composite skills coming out, then we say one of two things. Either we need to train them to be more fluent if they have actually accurately mastered all the components, or we're missing something. There's a component that's in there that we didn't teach. And that's going to help us enhance our curriculum.